I'm a truck driver, and on Monday I fueled diesel, and today I fueled again. I paid 67 cents a gallon more in diesel. I have 300 gallons I put in, so that's a lot of money. I mean, Americans we're struggling here. We need help. We're supposed to be America first. That's why we voted President Trump in. I voted for him every time, and I voted him because he was America first and got rid of the illegals. And it's not happening. This war is going to be costing us, and we're all going to start paying more for everything.
Maybe the illegals weren't really the heart of the problems that we're dealing with here in the United States. But nonetheless, that was a 3-time Trump voter who clearly is not happy with the president now that we are at war yet again in the Middle East, which might explain why the White House is now scrambling to course correct before the economy goes kaput. But I don't think we're dealing with people who are competent enough to maybe pump the brakes and reverse the damage. I could be wrong. Cenk, your 2 cents.
So the market started to crash today. The Dow lost 800 points. So Pam Bondi's going to be heartbroken. So this is a double whammy. Not only is the war going disastrously, but now it will also cause the economy to go disastrously. And Anna, after you give us all your facts, I have a new breaking news story that also affects this.
Oh, goody. I love it. Okay, so Sean Hannity, who has been cheerleading war with Iran, suddenly finds himself apologizing to his callers. Why? Well, because the war has already translated to higher prices at the gas pump. Take a look.
President Trump has stopped nuclear weapons from being in the hands of an absolute madman. And that was not just the biggest thing, it was absolutely essential. He had to open the Straits of Hormuz, or the world oil shortage would have been devastating for everybody. We're already up again over $4 a gallon, by the way, in diesel and gasoline, or at least diesel. Gasoline, I think, is still staying under around.
By the way, I'm very sorry about that, because that means less money in your pocket, and that makes your job harder. The only thing I can say that maybe will give you hope, I think this will be temporary. That's my guess.
It always is with President Trump. He always knows the right path back to prosperity for us.
Hannity, your guess is garbage. And the reason why I say that is because you're not an idiot and you know what's going on in the Middle East. Iran has struck some of the oil infrastructure in the Middle East, which is going to be disastrous. And not just the oil infrastructure, also gas infrastructure. So Qatar's, LNG production was targeted, and now it's offline indefinitely. So that's going to hurt. We don't even know when they're going to be online again. The Saudi oil fields were targeted. It was blamed on Iran. Iran has taken responsibility for some of the strikes that have been carried out. They didn't take responsibility for that strike, which makes me think it might have been a false flag carried out by the Israelis. But nonetheless, the point remains. The oil fields are being targeted. Oil infrastructure, gas infrastructure is being destroyed. Yeah, that's going to cause prices to go up at the pump. And that has hey, you know what? This is an actual trickle down effect, because if the price of oil and gas goes up, that translates into higher prices for everything. But Cenk, there's a Fox News poll that shows that in the past week, the average price of gasoline has jumped more than 25 cents to $3.25 a gallon, which would be quite a bargain in California. But in the rest of the country, that is a higher price, of course. That's 13 cents higher than on former President Joe Biden's last day in office. And Americans were really concerned about the cost of living before we went to war against Iran. So those concerns, of course, haven't been addressed and aren't going away anytime soon. Only 22% of voters say inflation is completely or mostly under control. 57% rate their personal finances negatively. Half of voters identify the cost of living as the most important economic issue facing the country, far ahead of government spending at 18%. I wish that number was a little higher though, because our debt is insane. Jobs at 10%, income inequality at 9%, tariffs at 8%, and taxes at 4%. And Politico spoke to several anonymous energy industry executives with knowledge of the Trump administration's strategy or lack thereof. And the White House is apparently looking under every rock for ideas on improving energy prices, especially gasoline prices, said one of the executives. How about we don't go to war in the Middle East and risk, either destroying or damaging oil and gas infrastructure in oil and gas producing countries in the Middle East? This isn't difficult. Energy Secretary Chris Wright and other advisors focused on energy policy, including a council led by Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, are getting screamed at to find some good news on bringing down prices. The same executive said. And shockingly, Politico reports that the Trump administration had no plan at all for how to keep energy prices low when they launched this war. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other hawkish members of the administration were leading the administration's planning, but other administration officials who would normally argue to keep oil prices low had initially been told to take a back seat. And per one of the other energy executives, the faction of the White House that would care about $80 to $90 oil per barrel, of course, was being silenced. There were louder voices winning at the moment. So that's what we're dealing with, Cenk. I mean, this is not an administration that seems to care about planning ahead. And not only are we getting dragged into a war we shouldn't be involved in at all, there's a price that we're gonna pay, both when it comes to potentially losing more soldiers, but also when it comes to bankrolling this war and the impact it's going to have on gas prices. So we're already starting to see the beginning phases of all of that.
So I'm gonna get to the breaking news in a sec, but first, gas prices 13 cents higher than under Biden. It's an epic disaster. So he used to, gas prices are too high. Gas prices, well, I'm not gonna go into any wars, so I'm America first. Now he's violated all of his promises, and the economic ones are the most important ones. Why? So when people go to vote, there's two things they care most about. The two things you should look at most. One is which way are independents leaning? The other is what do people feel about the economy? So those are your two most important indicators of who's gonna win an election. So for example, right now, if you looked at the approval ratings of the Democrats in Congress and the Republicans in Congress, the Democrats are still lower in approval rating than the Republicans. So you think so it didn't affect the Republicans. No, that's not right. The reason why the Democrats' number is lower is because there's a ton of internal dissatisfaction within the Democratic Party. They don't like their own leaders, and they are very right? So they're disgruntled with their own party, but when you go to see who are people going to vote for, independents are leaning massively to Democrats just to get away from the Republicans. Not because the Democrats have done a great job of bringing them in, but also as you just saw from Anna's numbers, the economic numbers are terrible. Those are the kind of economic numbers that I thought would near guarantee a loss for Joe Biden. And so that turned out to be, right. It was in a lot of ways, right? And now Trump is in the same exact kind of trouble, in fact, a little worse. So then that leads me to the news story that I just saw. The Gulf countries, here, let me read you the headline from Financial Times, and they have an exclusive on this. Gulf states could review overseas investments to ease financial strains caused by Iran war. So there's a hidden meaning in there. So what they're saying is, look, we now have all these costs. We've got apartment buildings being bombed, and this is because of America and Israel. And as I told you earlier in the show, I was on a show that was based in the UAE this morning, and they interrupted for breaking news of one of the top billionaires in the UAE going basically, I thought we were gonna be protected. That's why we did the deal with Israel and America. Now it turns out, no, we're in greater danger. So what was the point? And why did America choose to go into this war knowing allies like us would get deeply hurt? So now when those very wealthy Gulf countries take away their overseas investments, what of course they're referring to as Israel and America, well, that's gonna hurt our economy too. But the hidden meaning is overseas investments in the Trump family.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, finally a silver lining.
Yeah.
Give it to me, Cenk. Give me more. Give me more.
So the Gulf countries were told by Israel and America, especially UAE and Saudi Arabia, don't worry, sign the Abraham Accords and we'll put our bases there and because of us, you'll be perfectly protected. And now they find out that it was all a lie. Now, of course, we could have told them it was a lie from day one. It's stunning how little some world leaders know, right? And they feel super burned right now. And remember, of course, there's the $400 million plane that was given to Donald Trump. The Saudis gave $2 billion to Jared Kushner to invest. And then there was a talk of a new deal with the Trump team. Not talk, there was a new deal with the Trump team, and they were gonna get a couple more $1 billion from that. Now, if all of that starts to go away, then Donald Trump's gonna be in a cold sweat panic. So that is a very interesting threat, but also goes to show you those countries are super pissed at us for starting this totally unnecessary war that has hurt their countries and their interests. So now even our allies are looking at hurting our interests, which is only gonna make the economy worse. So Anna, I'll give you a second silver lining here. As those countries begin to put pressure on Trump, and we start to run out of interceptor missiles, at some point we're gonna have to withdraw our ships from the Gulf. Otherwise, without interceptor missiles, they'll be sitting ducks. So what if Trump in a couple of weeks goes, well, I said 4 weeks, and this thing's turning into a disaster, gas prices are sky high, my beloved stock market has crashed, and now the sheiks won't even bribe me anymore. All right, Israel, we gotta go. And then Israel.
That'd be great. He should do that now. He should do that right now. In fact, it would have been like, there's actually a pretty clear exit ramp right now where he could theoretically, even though we know the truth, but for people who aren't paying close attention, I think they'd fall for it. He could claim victory. I took out the Ayatollah, obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities. We're done here. Bye-bye. But yeah.
You remember I said that in like the second day of the war. I was like, we already killed Ayatollah. We already destroyed their nuclear facilities. Yep. Mission accomplished. Let's get it. At that point, no American had died, right? So now we got 6 dead. And guess what? Now Republican senators are beginning to say the same thing we were saying. They're like, wait, are you sure the mission isn't accomplished? I mean, they'll get upbraided by their Israeli handlers. But so the only reason we're in here is because Donald Trump feels some sort of loyalty for certain reasons to the Israelis.
I don't think it's loyalty. That man isn't loyal to anything other than himself. I think for Trump, there's something going on. And I don't know what Netanyahu is hanging over his head, but he tends to get more and more extreme in favor of Israel's cause after Netanyahu visits. So do with that information what you will.
Yeah, real quick, last thing on that. So look, Trump loves money. The Israelis gave him the most amount of money in these elections. The Adelson family did, et cetera. But the UAE and all these other Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, were giving him even more money. So now they're threatening that. But I think I'm just gonna say it, I've been saying it, I think it's blackmail. Because if he wants more money, he would definitely go with the Gulf. And now the Gulf countries have turned against Israel in this reporting. So if it's money, he'll definitely leave, right? But it seems like he didn't want to do this war in the first place. He called it a detour. He said it is for other countries. So I think they've got something on him. But if he does leave, like it's gotten bad enough and he's thinking I'm cooked anyway, and he withdraws our troops and withdraws from the war and leaves Israel by himself, then we'll definitely find out if we were right or wrong, because at that point, Netanyahu will definitely release whatever information he had on Trump, if he had any. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.